Okay, guys, I'm going to read from something that's very close to my heart, but I'm going to explain what it is first. I've been studying something called evolutionary astrology, and it works on the basis that if we all believe we have a soul, and I think many of us do, that when we come into this life, we are here to evolve as human beings, and we're here to evolve, our consciousness and the way we deal with other people and our own humanity, and that really we're all in it together. So whatever's going on, this is not about spirituality as such, that we are all one. It's not about that. It's about our own individuated state of being and what happens as we become individuated. And Jeff Wolf Green was a gentleman who wrote a lot of material on evolutionary astrology. I did start learning astrology in 2015 through somebody I met on YouTube, and I had a lot of sessions with her, a wonderful woman called Sonia Francis. I then started digging a bit deeper and came across somebody called Simon Vorster, who is very into the evolutionary astrology style, and as a result of that I did work with him as well, and I did go on to do some courses that he provides, which have been very beneficial to me and my own level of consciousness rising and understanding humanity. The other thing I like about evolutionary astrology, or astrology in general, which a lot of people aren't aware of, if you've heard of Carl Jung, or if not Carl Jung, if you've heard of Freud, Carl Jung was 20 years younger than Freud, and early in his life they became friends, and Freud and Carl Jung became friends, and Carl Jung spoke a lot about the archetypes and the meaning of dreams and things like that. And Carl Jung basically looked at 450 charts, astrology charts of married couples, because in astrology every planet is an archetype. It has a definition, a meaning, an energy about it. And for instance, Mars, if you think of that energy, to make it really simple, if you think of that Rambo energy of get up and go, or Rocky, it's like I'm making ourselves work hard and do and reach for what we want to reach in life. And then if you look at Pluto, that's about the underworld and what's below the unconscious in us. And then if you look at Venus, Venus isn't just about love, which a lot of people think it is. Venus is also about our needs and our desires. So as you can see, each planet, just from the three I've given you, basically hold an archetypal sense and a meaning and energy. So what I'm going to now do is read from the evolutionary astrology a website, which I'm going to put below here. So if you bear with me as I read this, because I find this absolutely fascinating. So definitely I'll put the link below. This is about the individuated state. So the more conscious we become, the more individuated we become. We stop, following people and things and society. We begin to go inward and look at ourselves. But this is how it works. And I'm reading from this article here. And it says, astrologically speaking, the individuated state correlates to Uranus, because the soul now desires to liberate or rebel against the consensus state from which it is now evolving away from. Instead, the soul, being defined by the consensus to shape its sense of reality in general and its personal identity specifically, the soul now desires to discover who and what it is, independent of such conditioning. So my example there would be that, everybody gets up and, at the same time every day, 7 o'clock every morning, goes to work at 9, comes home, cooks their dinner, stuff like that. As we become individuated, we move away from that way of thinking about what, is normal and what we should be doing, what exams we need to take, how qualified we need to be, how much money we think we need to have to be worthy. I'm going to continue reading. So earlier it was stated that if a soul were in the consensus state and the scientist says astrology is bogus, this would then be the automatic belief of those souls who are within the consensus state. If that same scientist said this to a soul within the individuated state, the response would be something like, no thank you, I will think for myself. So the individuated state is thinking for ourselves. That is just that we're not believing everything that people tell us. That's with regard to politics, the news, you know, what foods are good for us. We begin to think for ourselves. Continue reading. Souls in this evolutionary state inwardly feel different than the majority of society and country of birth, because of the desire to liberate from the consensus. The awareness of the souls in this state progressively expands to include ever larger wholes or frames of reference. So it means we become very expanded, and we want to be liberated from, you know, what's going on in the world. Like, we feel out of place because we feel different, because we're not fitting in. We're not having, you know, doing the traditional things like getting married, having children. And you can see how society is becoming individuated. Slow as it is, we can see how that's going on around us. People are changing. Continuing reading, the expansion of awareness begins because the soul no longer can identify with the consensus of the society of birth. So that's where we've come from, yeah? As a result, the soul now feels a progressive detachment from society, like standing on the outside looking in. This then allows the soul to objectify itself relative to personal awareness and self-perception, rebelling against the consensus beliefs, values, moralities, what constitutes meaning for life itself, and so on. The soul now begins to question the assumptions that most people hold dear to their heart that correlate to what reality is and what it is not. As a result, this soul now begins to experiment by investigating other ways of looking at and understanding the nature of life itself. This is a reflection of the independent thinking that characterizes this evolutionary state. And it is through this independent thinking and investigating all kinds of different lands and cultures that allows for an ever-increasing expansion of their consciousness, and thus their sense of personal awareness. As a result of this, souls no longer feel at home in their own land, in their country or birth. So we can see this all over the world, you know, where you've got religious aspects, you've got beliefs about what we should do and how we should be. Now I'm going to go on to the first subdivision of the individuated state. And remember, I'm going to post this article link below the video so that you're able to access it and read it. So the soul will typically try to compensate for this inner feeling of being different, of not belonging to the consensus, and the inner sense of alienation by trying to appear normal. So this means that whilst we've got these different things going on in us and different understanding, we'll still try to appear normal and still try to fit into, you know, the reality that's being created by the consensus. Then, this compensation then causes the soul to structure their outer reality, much as souls do in the consensus state, normal kind of hours of work, normal kind of friends, and normal appearance, and so on. Yet inwardly, they feel and know they can no longer personally identify with that compensatory reality that they attempt to sustain. This compensation manifests in the subdivision because, after all, the consensus is where the soul has just been. Thus, it constitutes a sense of security relative to the inner feeling of being detached and different. We must remember that for most people, the sense of security in life is a function of constancy and self-consistency, and self-consistency is a function of the past. So the past would be the way things have been done in the past. Like, in order to be normal, this is the way it's done, and we continue to follow a path of this is the way it's done, even though it may not be useful to us or correct for us, or it may not work for us. Okay, going on. As a result of the compensation manifests as a reaction to this increasingly new feeling of being different, of not belonging anymore to the consensus. This feeling creates a sense of insecurity in the first subdivision because it is brand new. So for many, many people, at this time on planet Earth, there's a lot of things that we're doing that are brand new, that have not been done before. Now, the soul has not been here before. That's what it means. It's like we've not done this before. We've not, you know, with all of the technology we have, for instance, like, you know, YouTube, it's, you know, 2005, I believe it came out. So even the fact that I'm making a YouTube right now, you know, people in the past, you know, prior to 2005 couldn't do this stuff. So this is new, what I'm doing, putting myself out there like this. And some people are afraid to do this. So you can see that, you know, we're still working through our beliefs and what we want for ourselves. And not just referring to YouTube, you know, many, many things. So again, this feeling creates a sense of insecurity in the first subdivision because it is brand new. The soul has not been here before, yet this act of compensation creates a very real state of living a lie. So it's almost like we will know that we'll feel we're living a lie. We're not following so-called our soul's purpose when we're trying to fit in with the world. Going on again, even as this compensatory behavior occurs, the soul will nonetheless be questioning everything deep within themselves in the privacy of their inner life. Typically, they will read all kinds of books that contain ideas that go way beyond the norm as it is defined by the consensus. Many, depending on cultural possibilities, will take classes or workshops that have been and have these themes of new intentions, so to speak, yeah. Some will seek out alternative environments to find and bond with others of like mind and others who feel as they do. And for me, I believe that, you know, this is one of the things that the internet has given us. It's opened up the world, and it's allowed us to really be different in many ways, and to explore different things and learn different things at the speed of light. You know, years ago, if people wanted to know something, you know, 50 years ago, they'd have to reach for an encyclopedia. Now we just Google it. So clearly, expansion of consciousness, it's speeded up. Then we've got this compensatory behavior will progressively give way, involute, as the soul evolves further in the subdivision. The soul will progressively distance itself from the consensus and begin to form relationships with other alienated souls just like itself. Because of the necessity of work or a job, most of these souls will either do any kind of work just to get by, just to pay their bills, without identifying such work in any way, or they will actualize a work that is individualistic and symbolic of their own individuality. So an example that comes to mind would be that, you know, 30 years ago, if you became a bank manager, you were a bank manager for life. If you became a manager of an office, you were doing that for life. Now, people, you know, will take different types of jobs, and they, as long as they can get their bills paid, you know, when they're individuated, the work is not the main issue because they're trying to find out what they really want from the world and what they really want to do. Then in this article, we've got the second subdivision of the individuated state, which I think is interesting, so I'm going to continue reading. This is the second subdivision of the individuated state. The underlying archetypes of Uranus as it correlates to rebellion at its highest. This rebellion is so extreme that the soul now has thrown off almost any idea or philosophy that has come before at any level of reality. Such souls end up in a kind of existential void and typically hang out with other such alienated souls, which has the effect of reinforcing the total state of rebellion from all of reality other than the reality they now have defined through the void. So these souls will exhibit a deep fear of integrating into society in any way, in any kind of way, for the fear suggests to them that if they do, that somehow the society and reality will absorb their hard-won effort to become individuals, so to speak. So that's, you can see that goes on around us as well. Like we can go over the top, we'll become individuated, we see that we don't like the way things are, and then we can really sort of like, you know, throw off the shackles and our limitations and go the opposite way. It says also, as a result, these souls typically hang out in the avant-garde of society, hurling critical atom bombs at society so as to reinforce their sense of personal righteousness, defined by their alienation from the consensus. So then we're going to go on, and you can read this article because I've not read all of that on the second subdivision. The third subdivision of the individuated state. And this is where I find myself to be now, because I, did not feel that I fitted in. Then I went, sort of bananas, so to speak, and very against, authorities in my own sense of self, not so much outwardly, but inwardly. And now the third subdivision of the individuated state. The soul will then begin to manifest within society or reality as a truly unique and gifted person from the viewpoint of the consensus. So that means we begin to give value or put something into the world that has not been done before, that is going to help other people, and we're sharing in the raising of our consciousness. We can't do it alone. Like, whoever I speak to, whoever listens to this, I've been listening to people like the astrologers I've been learning from, and that's guided me. So it's all a knock-on effect. And we'll go on here. So then it says, this means that such souls will have in some way a unique gift or capacity to help the consensus itself evolve through integrating that capacity or gift within the consensus. Yet these people will not inwardly feel identified with the consensus. They stand inwardly very distant from it. The consensus of these souls has progressively expanded through the individuated state in such a way that they are aware of the entire world and the relativity of beliefs, values, moralities, and so on. As a result, they will feel within themselves to be world citizens, much more than being a singular citizen of the country of birth. The inner pondering of this very nature of existence, the nature of creation, the nature of who they really are, essentially defines the nature of their consciousness. Progressively, these people begin to really open up their consciousness to the universal cosmos, to God S, not just God, God S, not the God S defined through consensus religions, but the real or natural God or Goddess. A perfect example in recent history, he says here in this article, is souls like Albert Einstein, and another one would be Howard Hughes. So it's where we become really individuated. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to that. And I'll be making some astrology videos, and I'm doing all sorts of things, but that's something that I wanted to share today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you.